The arrow split the air with surgical precision, missing Jackson Pierce's ear by exactly 3 millimeters, the precise distance Harper Madison had calculated while he and his crew cornered her in the abandoned gymnasium. 2 minutes earlier, they'd laughed at the weird new girl who carried an old bow case instead of designer bags. But now Jackson's face had drained of all color as he realized the Olympic bronze medalist they'd been tormenting for weeks wasn't just some helpless transfer student. Harper Madison arrived at Westfield Elite Academy on a rainy Tuesday morning, her mother's beat-up Honda Civic looking painfully out of place among the BMWs and Range Rovers in the student parking lot. At 17, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent years perfecting a craft that demanded absolute focus. But her thrift store clothes and the worn archery case slung over her shoulder immediately marked her as different in this world of privilege and pedigree. The scholarship letter had felt like a lifeline when it arrived 3 months after her father's death. Westfield Elite Academy, renowned for producing Ivy League students and professional athletes, had offered her a full ride based on her Olympic performance the previous summer. Bronze medal at 16 in women's individual archeria, feat that should have opened doors, but instead left her family drowning in training debts after her father's construction accident took away their primary income. "You sure about this, honey?" her mother had asked that morning, worry lines deepening around her eyes as she watched Harper gather her things. The past year had aged Patricia Madison a decade. First, the accident, then the medical bills, then selling their house to pay for lawyers who ultimately couldn't win against the construction company's team of corporate attorneys. "We need this, Mom," Harper had replied, checking her father's old watch one last time. The scholarship covered tuition, books, and housing, but more importantly, it put her back in front of college scouts. One more year of competition. One more chance at a full ride to a Division I school, and maybe she could pull her family out of the financial quicksand that threatened to swallow them whole. The rain intensified as she walked through Westfield's imposing gates, her second-hand raincoat doing little against the September downpour. Students hurried past in their North Face jackets and hunter boots, barely glancing at the girl with the strange case and the determined expression. Harper had competed on international stages, faced opponents from 30 countries, and maintained her composure under pressure that would break most adults. A new school shouldn't have fazed her. But Westfield Elite Academy operated on different rules than the Olympic Training Center. "Fresh meat," someone called out as she entered the main building, shaking water from her coat. A group of boys lounged against designer lockers, their Letterman jackets marking them as members of the lacrosse team, Westfield's pride and joy. According to the promotional materials, the one who'd spoken stepped forward. 6 feet 2 inches of inherited confidence and carefully styled blonde hair. Jackson Pierce. She'd learn later, though his reputation preceded his introduction, son of a pharmaceutical executive and a federal judge, captain of the lacrosse team, an undisputed king of Westfield's social hierarchy. His blue eyes swept over her with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced real consequences, taking in her damp hair, her worn sneakers, and the case that clearly wasn't holding a violin or flute like the other scholarship kids. "What's in the case?" "Scholarship?" he asked, his tone making the last word sound like something contaminated. His friends Marcus Chen, whose family owned half the commercial real estate in the city, and Tyler Brooks, son of a senator, flanked him with practiced intimidation. Harper met his gaze steadily, a habit drilled into her by years of competition where showing weakness meant losing before the arrow left the bow. "Archery equipment." The laughter that followed had an edge to it, sharp and meant to cut. "Archery?" Tyler snorted. "What is this? The Hunger Games? You planning to hunt your lunch? Leave her alone." "Jackson." The voice came from behind Harper, a girl with dark skin and natural hair that defied Westfield's unspoken conformity rules. Denise Williams. Harper would discover, one of the few scholarship students who'd survived Jackson's targeting by being too brilliant to expel and too connected through her mother's position at the district attorney's office to harass openly. Jackson's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. "Just welcoming our new classmate, Denise, making sure she knows how things work around here." He stepped closer to Harper, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne mixing with the lingering scent of marijuana that clung to his jacket. "See, at Westfield, we have standards. Money might buy you a spot here, but respect? That's earned." And trust fund babies who pretend to be athletes because they played with toys at summer camp? They learn quick where they stand. The hallway had grown quiet. Students stopping to watch the familiar ritual of Jackson establishing dominance over another newcomer. Harper recognized the dynamics immediately pack behavior. Dominance display. The careful choreography of bullying disguised as social orientation. She'd seen it in dozens of schools during her travels for competitions. But never directed at her with such focused intent. "I'll keep that in mind," she said evenly, sidestepping around him. The move was fluid, economical, the kind of spatial awareness that came from years of calculating distances down to the millimeter. Jackson's hand shot out, grabbing the strap of her case. I wasn't done talking. The case held her father's bow, the last thing he'd given her before the accident, a custom-made recurve bow that he'd saved for 3 years to afford, presented on her 15th birthday with tears in his eyes and pride in his voice. "For my future champion," he'd said, not knowing he'd never see her win with it. Harper's hand tightened on the strap. "Let go." "Or what?" Jackson tugged harder, his friends closing in. "You'll shoot me?" The laughter echoed off the marble floors, but Harper didn't move, didn't pull back. She simply looked at him with the same focus she brought to the shooting line. Cataloging distance, angle, pressure points. In archery, the first lesson was patience. The second was precision. The third was knowing exactly when to release. "Jackson," the voice cut through the tension like a blade. Assistant Principal Morrison stood at the end of the hallway, his expression carefully neutral. "Don't you have first period starting soon?" Jackson released the strap with exaggerated slowness, his smile never faltering. "Just being friendly, Mr. Morrison, making sure our new student finds her way." He stepped back, hands raised in mock innocence. "See you around." Katniss. The nickname would stick, whispered in hallways and scrawled on her locker within days. But Harper had endured worse: the crushing pressure of Olympic qualification, the weight of her family's hopes, the grief that threatened to break her focus every time she drew her bow. Jackson Pierce was just another obstacle, another target to assess and overcome. She found her first period class advanced physics, where her scholarship requirements demanded, straight-aced and settled into a seat near the back. Denise slipped in beside her, offering a sympathetic smile. "He's going to make your life hell," Denise whispered as the teacher began writing equations on the board. "It's what he does." Last year, he drove out 3 scholarship kids before Christmas. Administration won't touch him. His mother's on the board of trustees. Harper pulled out her notebook, her handwriting neat and precise. "I've dealt with worse." Denise studied her with curious eyes. "You really want a medal? At the Olympics?" "Bronze. Women's individual recurve. And you're here on scholarship? I thought Olympic athletes got endorsement deals." "Sponsorships." The question hung between them, touching on the reality Harper had learned the hard way. Not if you're not marketable enough. Not if you don't have the right look, the right story, the right connections. She kept her voice low. "Matter of fact, archery doesn't sell sneakers. And bronze doesn't buy groceries." The next weeks established a pattern that felt both familiar and exhausting. Jackson and his crew made her daily life a careful navigation of harassment disguised as pranks. Her books disappeared from her locker, replaced with toy bows from the dollar store. Her scholarship status was announced loudly whenever she entered a room. Photos of her in her second-hand clothes circulated on social media with captions about charity cases and welfare queens. But it was the subtler torments that cut deeper. The way conversations stopped when she entered the cafeteria, the empty circle of seats around her in every class, the professors who looked through her as if academic excellence from someone like her was somehow suspicious, requiring extra scrutiny and proof. Harper endured it all with the same discipline that had carried her through 4-hour training sessions and international competitions. Every morning, she rose at 5 to practice in the small park near the apartment she shared with her mother, setting up a makeshift range that drew curious looks from joggers. Every evening, she studied until her eyes burned, maintaining the perfect GPA that her scholarship demanded. "Why don't you report him?" her mother asked one night. Seeing the exhaustion, Harper couldn't quite hide. They sat at their small kitchen table, sharing a dinner of pasta and determination. "Because it won't change anything," Harper replied, thinking of the previous scholarship students who'd tried and found themselves facing mysteriously lost paperwork and sudden academic problems, and because I need to focus on what matters. Nationals are in 6 months. If I can place top 3, the college scouts will notice. That's the goal. Patricia Madison reached across the table, covering Harper's calloused hand with her own work-worn one. Your father would be proud of how strong you're being. Dad would have wanted me to fight back, Harper said quietly, remembering his lessons about standing up to bullies, about never letting anyone make you feel less than you were. Fighting back doesn't always mean throwing punches, baby. Sometimes it means succeeding despite them. The wisdom in her mother's words carried Harper through October and into November. As Jackson's campaign escalated from casual cruelty to targeted destruction, he discovered her father's death through social media stalking, found the news articles about the construction accident and the failed lawsuit. The information became ammunition. Deployed with surgical precision, heard your dad took a dive off a building, Tyler mentioned casually one day as Harper passed their table in the cafeteria. Guess clumsiness runs in the family. Better be careful with those arrows. The milk carton, in Harper's hand, crumpled, white liquid spurting through her clenched fingers. The cafeteria held its breath, waiting for her reaction, phones ready to capture whatever came next. But Harper simply grabbed napkins, cleaned her hand, and walked away, leaving silence in her wake. That night, she shot until her fingers bled through her tab, grouping arrows so tightly they damaged each other. Each release carried the weight of words unsaid, responses swallowed, dignity maintained at the cost of small pieces of her soul. You're pulling right, a voice observed from behind her. Harper spun, instinctively knocking an arrow before recognizing the speaker. David Kim, captain of Westfield's rifle team, stood at the park entrance with his own equipment bag. Sorry. Didn't mean to startle you. I practice here sometimes too. The range at school is always booked by the lacrosse team. Harper lowered her bow slowly. She'd noticed David in her physics class quiet, focused, one of the few students who treated her with indifference rather than hostility. I didn't know anyone else used this park. Most people don't get up at 5 a.m. on Saturdays, he said with a slight smile. But I'm guessing you're used to that. Olympic training schedules are brutal. You know about that? I follow archery. Watched your semi-final match online about 50 times. That last arrow in the wind, most people would have overcompensated, but you trusted your form. He set down his rifle case, maintaining respectful distance. I'm sorry about what Jackson's been doing. He's complicated. Harper almost laughed at the understatement. That's one word for it. His older brother was supposed to be Westfield's golden boy, full ride to Princeton for lacrosse. Probably headed for Wall Street or politics like their dad. David's voice carried old pain, carefully controlled. Overdosed junior year of college. Jackson's been trying to fill shoes that were probably too big for anyone. That's not an excuse, Harper said, thinking of her own loss, her own pressure. The ways grief could shape you without defining you. No, it's not. Just context. David paused, seeming to weigh his words. He's planning something bigger. I heard Marcus and Tyler talking in the locker room. They think you're too quiet, too controlled. They want to see you break. Let them try. The words came out harder than Harper intended, carrying an edge that made David step back slightly. She softened her tone. Thank you for the warning. December arrived with unusual warmth, the kind of false spring that made everyone restless and reckless. Harper had settled into a rhythm of survival early morning practice, classes where she excelled despite the isolation, evening training sessions that pushed her body to its limits. The indoor nationals were 8 weeks away. Close enough to taste, but far enough to feel impossible. Jackson had been suspiciously quiet for 2 weeks, content with minor harassments and whispered insults. Harper should have recognized the pattern, the calm before the storm, the drawn breath before the release. But she was focused on her own targets, her own goals, the careful calculation of effort and reward that competitive sports demanded. The trap revealed itself on a Thursday afternoon, elegant in its simplicity. Harper Madison, please report to the athletic director's office immediately. The announcement echoed through the school, drawing curious looks and knowing smirks. Harper gathered her things slowly, mind racing through possibilities. Had her scholarship been revoked? Had Jackson's family finally found the leverage they'd been seeking? The walk to the athletic complex felt longer than usual. Each step measured against the rhythm of her heartbeat. The office door stood open, revealing not just the athletic director but Principal Foster. Assistant Principal Morrison, and 3 members of the school board including Mrs. Pierce, Jackson's mother, her perfectly manicured hands folded over a manila folder. Miss Madison, Principal Foster began, his tone professionally neutral. Please, have a seat. Harper remained standing, instincts screaming warnings. What is this about? We've received some concerning reports about your behavior, Mrs. Pierce said, her voice carrying the same casual cruelty as her son's wore, and with rotter de bicenses out, threatening students, bringing weapons to school, creating an unsafe environment for your peers. My archery equipment is registered with the athletic department, Harper said evenly. I have written permission to store it in the designated lockers. The equipment isn't the issue, Morrison interjected, sliding a tablet across the desk. These are. The screen showed a series of text messages, supposedly from Harper's phone, containing graphic threats against Jackson and his friends. Mentions of arrows finding targets, of revenge for perceived slights, of violence waiting to be unleashed. The formatting was perfect. The language close enough to Harper's measured tone to be believable if you didn't know her. These are fake? Harper said, voice steady, despite the rage building in her chest. I've never sent these messages. The IT department traced them to your device. Mrs. Pierce said smoothly. Your phone, your login credentials, your IP address. Digital forensics don't lie. Miss Madison. Harper's mind raced, calculating angles and distances, understanding the precision of the trap. They'd needed her phone just long enough to clone it, to create a digital trail that would hold up to casual scrutiny. When had they? The memory surfaced. Last week, when her backpack had gone missing for an hour, supposedly moved by janitors during a chemical spill cleanup, her phone had been inside. Password protected, but not impossible to crack for someone with resources and motivation. This is what you've been planning, Harper said, looking directly at Mrs. Pierce. Your son has harassed me for months, and when I didn't break, you decided to remove me another way. That's a serious accusation, Principal Foster warned, but Harper caught the flicker of discomfort in his eyes. He knew, on some level, what was happening, but knowing and acting were different calculations in a school funded by Pierce family donations. We're prepared to offer you a choice. Mrs. Pierce continued, ignoring Harper's words. Withdraw voluntarily, quietly, and this stays internal. No police involvement, no criminal record, no impact on your athletic aspirations, or we proceed with formal charges, and you can explain to college recruiters why you were expelled for making terroristic threats. The room felt airless, the walls closing in with inevitable precision. Harper thought of her mother, working double shifts to cover rent, of her father's bow, waiting in her locker like a promise unfulfilled, of the bronze medal that had cost everything and bought nothing but this moment of impossible choices. I need time to consider, Harper said finally. You have until tomorrow morning, Morrison said, something like sympathy ghosting across his features. I'm sorry it's come to this. Harper, you're a talented young woman, but sometimes situations become untenable. Harper left the office with measured steps, holding her composure through sheer will. The hallways were empty, classes in session, but she could feel the weight of surveillance, the certainty that Jackson would know within minutes that his plan had succeeded. She found herself at her locker, combination spinning under familiar fingers. Her father's bow case sat inside, worn leather carrying the ghost of his hands. Harper pulled it out slowly, mind already calculating trajectories that had nothing to do with competition. Don't. Denise appeared beside her, breath coming fast, as if she'd run across campus. Whatever you're thinking, don't. That's what they want for you to do something stupid. To prove them right. They've already won, Harper said quietly. Fake messages. Fabricated evidence. Even if I could prove it was planted, who would believe me over them? David would. He's been documenting everything. Building a case. He knows kids who can do real forensics. Not the surface-level stuff the school IT department managed. We can fight this. Harper turned to look at her Denise Williams. Scholarship kid who'd survived by being smarter and more connected than her tormentors realized. Why would you risk it? You've managed to stay under their radar. Because someone has to stand up, Denise said fiercely. Because I've watched them destroy too many of us. Because you're the first one who might actually be strong enough to fight back and win. Harper's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, but she recognized the tone immediately. Heard you're leaving us. Katniss. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Or Dow could use the entertainment. The rage that Harper had controlled for months, compressed into a diamond-hard core of discipline, finally found its crack. She looked at the message, at her father's bow case, at Denise's determined face, and made a decision that would change everything. They want to see me break? Harper said softly. Then let's show them what that really looks like. The plan formed with the same precision Harper brought to competition. David's connections in the computer science program confirmed what she suspected: the messages had been sent through a spoofing app. Traceable if you knew where to look. The real evidence lay in the metadata, the subtle fingerprints that amateur hackers always left behind. More importantly, Jackson's crew had gotten sloppy, bragging in group chats about their ultimate prank. We need more than digital evidence, David said during their impromptu strategy session in the park. Screenshots can be dismissed. Records can be altered. We need something undeniable. Harper smiled for the first time in weeks, the expression sharp as an arrow's point. Then we give them what they want. A confrontation they can't resist. Recording. The abandoned gymnasium behind the main athletic complex had been closed for renovations since the previous year. Its permits tangled in bureaucratic delays that conveniently left it accessible to students who knew which doors didn't lock properly. Jackson's crew used it for parties, for hazing rituals, for the kind of activities that required privacy and plausible deniability. Harper sent the message from a burner phone. Denise procured, you win. I'll leave. But first, I want to talk, alone. Old Jim. After practice tomorrow. I'll bring what you really want. The response came within minutes. Bring the toy bow. We'll give you a proper send-off. David shook his head. This is dangerous. They'll bring backup. Cameras. Everything. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. Harper said with quiet certainty. They want to humiliate me. To break me on camera for their collection. They think I'm just another scholarship kid they can destroy for entertainment. She touched her father's bow case gently. They have no idea what I really am. Friday afternoon arrived gray and humid, the air thick with approaching storm. Harper attended her classes as usual, projecting defeated acceptance that drew satisfied smirks from Jackson's circle. The performance grated against every instinct, but she'd learned long ago that the best shots often required seeming to aim elsewhere. At 4:30, she made her way to the old gym, bow case in hand, and phone recording in her pocket. Denise and David were positioned outside with their own cameras, ready to document whatever unfolded. The heavy doors creaked open under her touch, revealing exactly what she'd expected. Jackson stood in the center of the basketball court, flanked by Marcus and Tyler. Two more lacrosse players lurked near the exits, Connor Wells and Shane Patterson, both eager to prove themselves worthy of Jackson's inner circle. Multiple phones were already recording, their red lights like eyes in the dim space. The huntress arrives, Jackson announced, voice echoing off abandoned bleachers. Ready for your farewell performance? Harper set down her case with deliberate care, movements slow and precise. I want to make a deal. You're not in a position to negotiate. Marcus laughed, but Harper caught the slight uncertainty in his tone. Something about her calmness, her control, didn't match their script. I'll leave quietly. Harper continued as if he hadn't spoken. No formal withdrawal. No explanations. Just gone. But I have conditions. Jackson stepped forward, intrigued despite himself. I'm listening. You leave the other scholarship students alone? Denise? Amit. Carlos. Line all of them. Your fun ends with me. And why would I agree to that? Harper opened her case slowly, revealing not the compound bow they'd expected, but her father's recurve elegant, powerful, and absolutely professional grade. Because if you don't, I'll tell everyone what really happened to your brother. The gymnasium fell silent, except for the distant rumble of thunder. Jackson's face went white, then red, his carefully maintained control cracking. You don't know anything about my brother, Michael Pierce. Graduated Westfield 2018. Princeton 2022. Except he didn't graduate. Did he? Harper's voice remained steady, each word an arrow finding its mark. He was expelled junior year for running the same kind of operation you're running now. Fake IDs. Study drugs. Party supplies for rich kids who wanted to play dangerous. Only he got caught when a freshman ended up in the hospital. And your family couldn't buy his way out of that one. Shut up. The words came out strangled. Disperate. The overdose wasn't an accident. It was guilt. And instead of learning from it, you're following the exact same path. Destroying the same kinds of kids he did. Harper lifted her bow. Not threatening but present. Real. So here's my offer. I disappear. Stay quiet about everything. Or I make sure every college recruiter, every Ivy League admissions officer, every future employer knows exactly what kind of legacy the Pierce family is building at Westfield. Jackson moved faster than she'd expected, crossing the distance in 3 strides, reaching for her throat, but Harper had spent years reading body language, predicting movement, calculating response time. She flowed sideways, letting his momentum carry him past, her bow coming up in a smooth arc that stopped inches from his face. Don't, she said quietly. You wanted to see what I really am? I'm someone who can put an arrow through a target the size of a quarter from 70 meters away. I'm someone who competed against the best in the world and won. I'm someone who's lost everything and kept going. The bow remains steady, unwavering. And I'm someone who's done playing your games. Tyler and Marcus started forward, but Jackson raised a hand, stopping them. For the first time since Harper had arrived at Westfield, she saw genuine fear in his eyes, not of physical harm, but of exposure, of consequences that couldn't be bought or intimidated away. You're recording this, he said. A statement rather than a question. Just like you are. Harper smiled coldly. Mutually assured destruction. Your move? The standoff stretched. Tension, singing through the air like a drawn bowstring. Thunder rolled closer, and the first drops of rain began pattering against the skylights. Harper could feel the others shifting. Uncertain. Their pack dynamics disrupted by prey that had revealed itself as predator. Get out, Jackson said finally. Voice hoarse. Just get out. The deal? Fine. Yes. The others stay alone. You disappear. We never speak of this again. Harper lowered her bow slowly, never breaking eye contact. I'll be watching. One move against any scholarship kid, one whisper of harassment. And every news outlet in the state gets the full story. The real story. She packed her equipment with the same measured precision she'd brought to the confrontation, aware of the phone still recording. The collective held breath of witnesses to something they'd never expected. At the door, she turned back one last time. You could have been better than your brother, she said quietly. You still can be, but that's your choice to make. The rain was falling steadily when she emerged. Denise and David, waiting with mixture of relief and awe. They walked together through the empty campus, their footsteps splashing through puddles that reflected the gray sky. So what now? David asked finally. You can't actually leave. The scholarship? Your mom. I'm not leaving, Harper said, surprising them both. Monday morning, I'll present Principal Foster with evidence of a coordinated harassment campaign, complete with documentation of the fake messages and their actual origin. Mrs. Pierce can explain to the board why her son has been using family resources to terrorize students. And Jackson has to live with knowing I could destroy him whenever I choose. That's a dangerous game. Denise warned. They'll come after you harder. No, they won't. Harper's certainty was absolute. Because Jackson Pierce just learned something important. There's a difference between power and strength. Power is inherited, bought, stolen. Strength is earned, arrow by arrow, day by day. And he'll never be strong enough to face someone who's already lost everything and survived. Monday's meeting with the administration went differently than anyone expected. David's digital forensics proved conclusive. The computer science students he'd recruited, demonstrating exactly how the messages had been faked and traced back to devices registered to Jackson's crew. More damaging were the screenshots from their group chat, obtained through a member who'd grown disgusted with the escalating cruelty. Shane Patterson, whose sister had been a scholarship student, driven out 2 years prior. Mrs. Pierce arrived, prepared for battle, but found the field already lost. Faced with evidence that could trigger criminal investigation and media attention that would destroy her husband's judicial nomination. She negotiated surrender with the same cold efficiency she'd once brought to Harper's destruction. Jackson withdrew from Westfield to focus on mental health and college preparation. His crew scattered, suddenly aware that their protection had evaporated. Marcus transferred to a boarding school in Connecticut. Tyler finished the year in uncharacteristic silence. his senator father unwilling to risk association with scandal. Harper never spoke publicly about what happened in the gymnasium. But the story spread anyway. Growing in the telling. The scholarship girl who'd faced down the untouchable elite with nothing but nerve and a bow. The quiet kid who'd turned the tables on her tormentors. The Olympic archer who'd proven that real strength couldn't be bought or inherited. You know they're calling you a legend, Denise said one morning as they walked to physics together. The hallways felt different, now still challenging. Still weighted with privilege and prejudice. But no longer hostile territory. I'm just a girl trying to graduate, Harper replied. But there was lightness in her voice that hadn't existed before. A girl who changed everything. Nothing's changed. Not really. There'll be other Jacksons. Other kids who think money makes them untouchable, maybe. But now they know it doesn't. Now we know it doesn't. Denise bumped her shoulder companionably. That's not nothing. The indoor nationals came and went. Harper taking silver this time. Her performance steady and controlled despite everything. College recruiters took notice not just of her shooting but of her character. The quiet strength that had carried her through adversity. The full ride to Northwestern felt like validation. But it was her mother's tears of relief that made it real. Years later, when Harper Madison stood on her second Olympic podium gold, this time she thought about that moment in the gymnasium. The weight of the bow in her hands. The fear in Jackson's eyes. The choice to be strong rather than cruel. Power, she'd learned, was temporary. It could be inherited and lost. Stolen and squandered. But strength? Strength was earned with every arrow. Every choice. Every moment you chose to stand rather than fall. She'd heard Jackson Pierce eventually found his own path. Working with addiction counseling after his own near miss with his brother's fate. They never spoke again. But she hoped the lesson had taken root. That real strength wasn't about breaking others, but about refusing to be broken yourself. The gold medal ceremony ended with anthem and applause. Cameras capturing the moment for history. But Harper's mind drifted to a rainy afternoon in an abandoned gym. To the moment she'd chosen precision over power. Strength over revenge. That was the victory that mattered. The one that couldn't be quantified in medals or rankings. She'd entered Westfield Elite Academy as a target. She'd left as a legend. But most importantly, she'd survived as herself Harper Madison, daughter of Patricia and James. Archer and student and living proof that sometimes the best shot isn't the one that destroys, but the one that reveals what was there all along. The arrow always finds its mark. The trick is knowing what you're really aiming for. The weeks following Jackson's departure transformed Westfield Elite Academy in ways both subtle and profound. Harper noticed it first, in the small thing scholarship students walking with straighter spines, conversations that didn't halt when she entered rooms, and the gradual dissolution of the invisible barriers that had once carved the school into territories of privilege and survival. You've got a visitor, Denise mentioned one Tuesday afternoon, gesturing toward the library where Harper spent most lunch periods now. Surrounded by students who'd discovered that the girl with the bow had more to offer than Olympic stories. Harper looked up from her calculus homework to find Connor Wells hovering uncertainly by the entrance. Jackson's former enforcer had lost weight, his lacrosse jacket hanging loose on shoulders that seemed to carry invisible burdens. "Can we talk?" he asked. Voice lacking the arrogant edge, she remembered. Harper nodded toward an empty chair, watching as he sat with the careful movements of someone navigating unfamiliar territory. The library's usual hum continued around them, but she caught several curious glances from students who remembered Connor's role in Jackson's reign. "I wanted to apologize," he began, then stopped, running hands through hair that needed cutting. "No, that's not, I do want to apologize. But that's not enough. What we did to you? To all the scholarship kids. There's no excuse that makes it okay." "Then why did you do it?" Harper asked, genuinely curious. She'd understood Jackson's motivations, the twisted grief and pressure that drove him, but the others who'd followed so eagerly remained a puzzle. Connor's laugh held no humor. "Because it was easy. Because it made us feel powerful. Because," he trailed off, searching for words that might explain the inexplicable. "My dad went to Westfield. His dad too. 3 generations of Wellsmen who ruled these halls. Went to Princeton. Joined the right clubs. Made the right connections. And every single one of them broke people along the way. It's like this sick family tradition nobody talks about but everyone expects. And now I can't sleep. I keep thinking about Maya Chen. You probably didn't know her. Scholarship kid 2 years ago. Brilliant writer. We made her life hell until she transferred, and last month I found out she tried to. She almost. His voice cracked. She's okay now. But when I read that, I realized we weren't just playing games. We were destroying actual people. Harper studied him. Seeing past the designer clothes to the 17-year-old boy wrestling with the weight of inherited cruelty. What do you want from me? Connor? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. He met her eyes properly for the first time. I guess I wanted you to know that what you did in that gym, it woke some of us up. Shane Patterson and I have been meeting with the administration about implementing an actual anti-bullying program. Not the useless poster campaigns they've tried before, but real accountability, peer mentoring, support systems, consequences that can't be bought off. And they're listening? They don't have a choice. Your evidence package didn't just expose Jackson, it revealed systemic failures going back years. The board's terrified of lawsuits. Media attention. Suddenly, they're very interested in reform. A ghost of his old smile appeared. Turns out consequences are pretty motivating when they can't be avoided. Harper found herself oddly moved by his effort. Even as she maintained her guard, "It's a start," she allowed. "But programs are just paper without people willing to enforce them. That's why I'm here. We need someone with credibility to help design it. Someone the scholarship kids trust, but who also understands the dynamics of power." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "We need you." The request surprised Harper enough that she actually smiled. 6 months ago, you were helping plan my destruction. Now you want my help building something better? 6 months ago, I was a different person. Or maybe the same person who finally had to look in a mirror. Connor stood, leaving a folder on the table. "The proposal's in there. Think about it. We've got a meeting with Principal Foster next week." After he left, Harper opened the folder to find a comprehensive plan for peer support systems, anonymous reporting mechanisms, and accountability measures that showed genuine thought and research. Attached was a list of signatures former bullies and victims alike who'd committed to making change real. "You're not seriously considering it," Denise said, reading over her shoulder. "Why not?" "Because leopards don't change their spots. Because Connor Wells spent 3 years terrorizing people for fun. Because people can surprise you." Harper interrupted gently. "Jackson's gone. But the system that created him is still here. We can either leave it to create more Jacksons, or we can try to build something better." The meeting with Principal Foster the following week brought together an unlikely coalition. Harper and Denise represented the scholarship students. Connor and Shane spoke for reformed participants in the old system. David Kim brought data and documentation. Even Mrs. Rodriguez from the counseling department attended, armed with years of frustrated attempts to address problems the administration had preferred to ignore. "This is ambitious," Foster said, reviewing their proposal. "Peer accountability panels, mandatory empathy training, financial penalties for harassment that parents can't simply pay away. You're asking us to fundamentally restructure how discipline works at Westfield. We're asking you to make this a school where everyone can learn without fear," Harper said calmly. "Where academic excellence isn't reserved for those who can afford protection. Where strength isn't measured by who you can hurt but by who you can help." Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "The liability issues alone are nothing compared to the liability of continuing to enable systematic harassment." David interrupted, sliding across a folder. "I've documented 37 cases over the past 5 years that could have resulted in legal action if families had possessed resources to pursue them. The Pierce incident opened doors. Parents are talking, comparing notes. The Patel family is already consulting attorneys about their daughter's experience last year." Foster's expression tightened. "The threat was implicit but clear change willingly, or be forced to change by courts and public opinion. We'll need school board approval," he said finally. "And implementation would be gradual. We've already scheduled a presentation for the next board meeting," Connor said. "My mother's on the board. She's receptive to new approaches after recent events." Harper had to admire the political maneuvering. Connor's mother, desperate to distance the Wells family from association with the Pierce scandal, would champion reform as evidence of their commitment to positive change. Sometimes, redemption and self-interest aligned perfectly. The program that emerged over the following months wasn't perfect, but it was real. Harper found herself spending hours training peer counselors, teaching them to recognize the subtle escalations that preceded serious harassment. Connor and Shane worked with former bullies, creating accountability partnerships that forced confrontation with past actions. "I never thought I'd see you teaching defensive psychology to lacrosse players," her mother commented one evening. Finding Harper surrounded by training materials, they're learning that real strength means protecting others, not preying on them. Harper replied, making notes on tomorrow's session. "Some of them are getting it faster than others, but they're trying." Patricia Madison sat beside her daughter, marveling at the young woman who'd emerged from such trials. "Your father would be so proud, not just of the medals or the grades, but of this using your strength to change things." Harper leaned into her mother's embrace, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. "I miss him, every day. But especially now, he would have known how to handle this better. Baby, you're handling it exactly how he would have, with courage, with compassion, and with perfect aim." Her mother kissed her forehead. "He's watching, and he's proud. I know it." The spring semester brought unexpected challenges and rewards. The anti-bullying program faced resistance from some parents who viewed it as coddling weakness, but the results spoke louder than complaints. Reported incidents dropped by 60%. Scholarship student retention improved dramatically. Academic performance across all demographics increased, as stress levels decreased. Harper's own life found new rhythms. Morning archery practice remained sacred, but afternoons often included mentoring sessions or program development meetings. Her friendship with Denise deepened, joined by unexpected additions like David Kim and even Shane Patterson, who'd become genuinely committed to reform after confronting the damage he'd participated in. "You know, colleges are going to love this on your application," Denise mentioned as they prepared for another peer counselor training session. "Olympic medalist who also reformed an entire school culture? Harvard will beg." "I'm not doing it for applications," Harper said, though she acknowledged the practical benefits. "I'm doing it because someone needs to, because we have the chance to make sure no one else goes through what we did." The truth was more complex. Every student who found safety in the new systems, every former bully who genuinely changed, every moment of connection across old divides, they all helped heal something the months of harassment had wounded. Harper was reclaiming not just her own power, but the very concept of strength itself. Indoor nationals arrived again. This time, with a cheering section from Westfield that included former enemies turned allies. Harper's silver medal felt different this year, less like survival and more like triumph. The college scouts who approached afterward asked not just about her athletic achievements, but about the leadership she demonstrated off the range. "Northwestern's lucky to get you," one recruiter from Stanford said after hearing about the peer program, "though if you ever want to transfer somewhere with better weather and a strong social justice program." Harper smiled politely, but her heart had already chosen. Northwestern offered not just athletic opportunity, but proximity to home, to her mother who'd sacrificed everything. The full ride meant Patricia Madison could finally reduce her work hours, maybe even take the community college classes she'd always dreamed about. Jackson Pierce's name surfaced only once more that spring. A letter arrived at Harper's home, handwritten on plain paper rather than the monogrammed stationery she might have expected. "Harper," it began, "I know I have no right to contact you, but I needed you to know something. I'm in therapy now. Real therapy. Not the kind my parents buy to make problems disappear. Your words that day in the gym about my brother, about following his path, they saved my life. I was already using, already selling, already becoming him. You held up a mirror I couldn't look away from. I'm not asking for forgiveness. What I did to you and others is unforgivable. But I wanted you to know that someone learned from your strength. I'm volunteering at a youth center now, trying to help kids before they become who I was. It's not enough. Will never be enough. But it's a start. Thank you for not destroying me when you could have. Thank you for showing me that real strength isn't about power over others but power over yourself. I hope your life is everything you deserve it to be. Jackson." Harper read the letter 3 times before showing it to her mother, who held her as she finally cried not for Jackson, but for all the pain that had led to this moment, all the growth born from suffering. "Do you forgive him?" Patricia asked gently. "I don't know," Harper admitted. "Maybe forgiveness isn't the point. Maybe the point is that change is possible, even for people who seem irredeemable. Maybe that's the real victory." Senior year rushed by in a blur of competitions, college preparations, and continued program development. The peer counseling program became a model, with other schools sending representatives to study Westfield's transformation. Harper found herself speaking at district meetings, her quiet confidence and lived experience, lending weight to arguments for systematic change. "You're becoming quite the activist," Principal Foster commented after one particularly effective school board presentation. "Have you considered education as a career? We could use teachers who understand both excellence and equity." "I'll stick with archery for now," Harper replied. But the seed was planted. Perhaps her future held more than medals and records. Perhaps it held the chance to shape systems from within, to ensure no student faced the choices she'd been forced to make. Graduation day dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect June morning that made everything seem possible. Harper stood in her cap and gown, surrounded by classmates who'd become allies, mentors who'd become friends, and a mother whose pride shone brighter than the sun. Valedictorian honors had gone to Tennessee, a victory that felt shared, given their study sessions and mutual support. But Harper had been chosen to give the senior address, a recognition of leadership that transcended grades, standing at the podium, looking out at assembled families representing every economic stratum. Harper thought about the girl who'd arrived at Westfield clutching her father's bow and little else. That girl had been strong but untested, skilled but isolated. The woman leaving Westfield was something more, a catalyst, a bridge builder, a living proof that strength could create rather than destroy. 4 years ago, she began, her voice carrying the same steady confidence that guided her arrows. Many of us arrived here believing in simple definitions. Success meant wealth. Power meant dominance. Strength meant never showing weakness. We're leaving with more complex truths. She spoke of transformation, both personal and institutional, of the courage required to change systems from within, of the difference between inherited privilege and earned respect. The audience listened with the kind of attention usually reserved for celebrities or politicians. But Harper was neither. She was simply someone who'd refused to break, and in doing so had shown others they could bend instead. "We face a world that will test every lesson we've learned here," she concluded. "It will offer easy paths paved with others' pain, quick victories built on someone else's defeat. But we've learned that real achievement comes from lifting others as we climb. That true strength lies not in perfect aim, but in knowing when to shoot and when to extend a hand instead." The applause that followed felt like punctuation to a chapter both painful and necessary. As Harper accepted her diploma, she caught sight of Connor Wells in the audience, his expression a mixture of gratitude and determination. Shane Patterson wore a peer counselor badge with genuine pride. Even Westfield itself seemed transformed, its marble halls no longer cold fortresses but spaces where growth was possible. The summer between high school and college passed in a whirlwind of intensive training and transition. Harper's focus sharpened as Olympic trials approached, her body and mind honing themselves toward a goal that had once seemed impossible but now felt inevitable. The lessons learned at Westfield about pressure, about performance under hostile conditions, about maintaining integrity when everything pushed toward compromise served her well in the competitive arena. Northwestern welcomed her that fall, with opportunities that justified every struggle. The archery program, coached by a former Olympic gold medalist, pushed her to new heights. Her academic pursuits in psychology and social justice found fertile ground, but it was the chance to mentor younger athletes, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, that ignited her deepest passion. "You have a gift," her coach observed after watching Harper work with a freshman who'd arrived overwhelmed by the dual pressures of athletics and academics. "Not just for shooting, but for seeing what people need to become their best selves."